lesson. All right. So first thing, we talked about it previously. What is the purpose and whatnot? Regardless the purpose of your slow motion shot, um, you still need to know how it's done or how it's actually prepared, right? So I have two files here. Our character swinging a sword. Nothing. Well, it's a fake sword. Okay. And then here, again, swinging the same sword right here. Eventually. All right. And the difference is it's the frame rate that it was recorded. Okay. This one, you might not be able to tell because we have very fast computers. This was shot in 24 frames per second, but to be technically correct, it's 2398, right? 24 frames per second is for digital negative only or uh, or analog, okay? Analog film, okay? When you actually shoot with your DSLR, even though it says 24 frames per second, you're actually shooting at 2398. They just kind of rounding it off. So that's important to understand because if you set your time frame to 24 frames per second instead of 2398, you will have an audio drift later on. It will not match because it wasn't really shot at 24. But why is there an option for 24 for editing? Well, because there's true 24. Okay. So the other one is shot at 120 frames per second. So to kind of put that into perspective, there's how much more on 120 is versus 24. That's like 5 times more. Okay. That's like 5 times more information. So imagine 24 frames per second, there's 24 photos captured, and it's 1 second. The other one, there's 120 photos captured, okay? So let's put that into the edit right here. I'm gonna go with 24 first. Just kind of show you how the slow motion in Davinci works. Okay, and it's pretty easy, and this is standard stuff. You can do this the same way, almost exactly the same way in Premiere and in Final Cut, right? And doing so, I'm just going to right click right here and then change my, where's my retime control or my speed control. Okay, so in retime you can do it almost interactively, very similar to when you speed ramp, okay? And when I mean speed ramp is they don't just slow it down, they also accelerate it. Have you seen those? Give me an example of a movie that does that. Anyone?
Explain it one more time.
Where they change the speed, slow it down, and accelerate it. Have you seen the movie 300? They slow it down, and on certain action, they accelerate it, and then they slow it down again. So they call that speed ramping. Okay? So you're not just slowing it, you're actually accelerating. Okay? So let's go here where it says change clip speed. Okay? So 100%. Okay? That's the normal. If I go here, let's put 200%. What happens to the speed now? It's 200%, so it's now faster. All right, so that's how you make your movie looking like back in the day. Why do they look like back in the day, like Charlie Chaplin and whatnot? Why are they faster looking and whatnot? Well, because back then they're manually cranked. It's a person dictating what it's supposed to be. So they're trained to roll it, let's say 18 frames per second. But what if that person start daydreaming? They slow down. They get excited. They crank it up a bit. You know, it's human control. So, all right. And then the playback, of course, it's what on the projector set. Okay. Anyway, let me change that back to 100%. Okay. And then, of course, when you do that, you gotta extend it again because I pulled it before. Okay. To slow it down, we go, let's say 50%. Okay, and what's going to happen is that, of course, there's more in here. Okay, but let's find that sword swing right there. So, okay, so you've probably seen, have you seen Hong Kong movies? Anyone here? Hong Kong action movies, okay? They do a lot of this effect where they slow down, and I think it has nothing to do with the look, it's just budget. Okay? So they're trying to slow down something that was shot in normal speed. So when we make something that was shot at, let's say, normal 24 frames per second, you're doubling the frames, you're tripling the frames, right? So you're slowing down something that information does not exist, so it doubles them, okay? So what happens is that you get this kind of choppy look, right? Great for flashbacks, though. This kind of choppy, unrealistic looking setting, okay? Because you're trying to kind of remember stuff in it, and usually when it comes to flashback and whatnot in movies, it's kind of hazy, right? They don't quite remember it, how it happened. So it has a aesthetic value when you do this, but you're not going to get that really smooth slow motion because you're using only 24 frames per second. You're actually doubling it, okay? So let's get rid of this. Let's bring in the 120 frames. Okay, so this is the 120 frames per second, okay? And I can guarantee you this plays super smooth. It's just that our computer does not agree that it should be played smooth, okay? So this is 120 frames per second, all right? So now let's try to slow it down. So if there's 120 frames, okay, how many times, well, I already gave you the answer before, how many times can I slow this down and still be normal playback? Yeah, it's about 5 times, right? Because when you go 60 frames, let's cut it in half, right? That's 2.5, right? 24 plus 24 is 48. 48 plus 12 is 60. So that's 2.5 right there. So even if you shoot something at 60 frames per second, you can slow it down about 2.5 times and it would still be normal looking. It wouldn't look like choppy. This one is 5 times because it's a shot at 120 frames, okay? So have you seen cameras that can do high frame rate like this? Almost all DSLR nowadays, okay? Back then, DSLR can't do this at all. And when they finally added that, you're only doing 60 frames at 720, not even full HD. Now they do 4K at 120. Your phone probably do 240 now at 4K. So ridiculous, right? So, but back then, if you remember our Audi R8, there's some slow motion shots, and then they're called Phantom because they were shot with a Phantom Flex camera. And I think depending on the flavor of Phantom Flex camera, they can shoot up to, I don't know now, but I think back then they can shoot not kind of like a standard res or just regular HD, 10,000 frames per second. Just imagine that. There's 10,000 frames packed into 1 second. That's mind-boggling. That's about, I think, almost 500 seconds. So you shot something in 1 second, you can play it in normal speed around 500 seconds. That's too much. Okay, so let's do this one. Change the clip speed to, let's say, let's go 50. Okay, we got more information, of course. Now look at that. It's still, well, she's not swinging the sword. We got to find it now since, there you go. That's still relatively smooth, right? So let's go crank that up. Let's go at 25%. Gotta find this spot now. Okay, right here. That's still really smooth. That's 25%. Okay. Now let's push it to, let's say, 10%. Now I gotta find it. And my phone's going nuts. All right, right here. This is got smooth. All right, now we can tell that we probably push it beyond the frame rate. Okay, so you can tell now that it's a little choppy. It's still kind of smooth though, okay? But not as smooth as 25%. You can tell here, right? The other thing also is that we shot this and we don't have enough speed actually because you can see the sword blurring, right? In slow motion, you should not blur anything at all. Hence, you miss that visual effects concept of freezing time. Okay, so this should have been shot at least 240 frames, I think, to freeze that sword. Okay, so the shutter speed, even at 120, it's still not fast enough with the sword blurring like that. Okay, so there you have it. To slow down, you simply right click it, sorry, and then change the speed right here. You can also reverse the speed. You can also freeze frame, and there's so many things that you can do with just manipulating time, okay? But the key factor here is that it's not just knowing how to slow it down, it's knowing that if you plan to use slow motion in your footage, I mean in your movie, you have to shoot them in the highest frame rate, in the highest resolution that you'll use as an output, all right? So let's say your movie is going to be mastered and, exported, let's say in HD, but you're smart, you shot it in 4K because you want a higher master, okay? Your 4K can only do, let's say, 60 frames per second, but your camera can do about 120 or 240 in HD. That's the thing you have to juggle right there. Should you go for a higher frame rate, but go to your lower resolution, which is your final output anyway, but you're not covering your master? Or, you're not matching it to 4K. So, but as long as the resolution holds, it should be, I think it should be fine. All right. So that's how we slow down and speed up clips in Davinci. You right click and then change clip speed. All right. So if I go here, let's say 500%, of course, you're going to have to find this footage right here. It's going to be super fast. All right, so time lapse. If you're doing video time lapse, and I'm not talking about photography time lapse, okay? If you're doing video time lapse, you set your poor GoPro to shoot for 2 days, and then that's how you want that time lapse to happen. You just right click, change the speed. All right.